The sighting occurred in a high-elevation park meadow in the Fan Creek drainage in Yellowstone's northwest corner. The first time I had heard anything was in the mid-late 70s. An outfitter and I were riding up Fan Creek in the northwest section of the park, up the drainage into Stellaria Creek. We heard a sound that just kept going and going. It was probably a mile away. It filled the entirety of the valley, kind of 1,000 like elk going to their death. I couldn't believe this thing had that much volume for that long a period of time. He had never heard anything like it neither. A couple of weeks later, I was coming out from Sportsman Creek, taking a trail which comes out of Fan Creek. I was 11 miles back in, up high in supple pine fir meadow complex. I was on a steep side hill with horses and in woods, but down below, about 40 to 50 yards, there was a kind of fairly flat meadow with dense thickets. There were these low fir growths that have a centerpiece tree, and then everything kind of cone shapes to ground. They were about 20 yards wide or so. The horses were flaring their nose and snorting, like they do when a grizzly bear is real close. But I could see fairly good all around, and I could not see one. So I began looking down below me, and the horses were really agitated. They're wanting to get out of there. I held them, but only with effort. I looked down to see where Grizz was, and I saw a deer at the edge of the thicket. All at once it bolted and started jarring ahead, perpendicular to me. Right then, coming out of the other side was this thing that was running on 2 feet. It was black like a bear, and it had long arms and ran. I think I held it there 30 seconds, but it got scared and then came out. It ran, but not super fast. It ran to another thicket and went at an angle out of the thicket to another thicket, about 40 to 50 yards away. At this point, the creature was 75 yards downslope. It kept hitting these thickets, trying to get away from me. I've never seen a bear do that. They'll always take a straight line. The first thing I thought was bear, but right away, I realized this black shaggy thing wasn't a bear. This thing was smart. I've never seen an animal trying to pick up protection as it fled. I tied that together with sound on the other side of the drainage. It wasn't that tall either. It looked like it was 6 foot, maybe 6'5". The side of the face looked like it had a lot of fur, and most of the time, it was angling away, so I only got a good look at the head for probably the first 10 steps. The proportions of the torso, it looked more stocky than anything else. I noticed the arms swung more than a human's would, and it did not have elbows cocked. This was no hoax. I've ridden maybe 50,000 to 70,000 miles in the backcountry on horses, and trust me, you encounter a lot of bears when you do that. This thing, whatever it was, the horses looked straight down to it. One guy I had met in the northeast section of the park, he was camped illegally. He said he had heard a noise really close to him. I made him describe it to me. He said it was probably within 20 yards. One other outfitter heard that also. That would be back in the early 80s for both of those. Another time, a crew examining the blister rust, which is a disease of white bark pine in the 1970s, came on an elk in the southeast corner of the park. They came on an elk and saw these big real footprints. They kind of got scared and headed out. On that same trip, they heard really weird noises up near Mountain Creek. One time, I was skiing into Heart Lake on the thoroughfare. We were 5 or 6 miles east of the road, and myself and the others, all at once, we saw these footprints going across the trail. There wasn't any path. and no one used to ski that far in back then. These were real big footprints and stretched out far apart. It was deep snow, but it was a fairly distinct track. That was the first and only track I've seen. In the early mid-'80s, in some drainage as Mountain Creek, we were just coming into the Howell Creek cabin near Eagle Creek Pass at 8,500 feet. We were coming in right before dark, and we heard that noise. I timed it at 26 seconds, about 300 to 400 yards beyond the cabin up the drainage. I checked the next day, couldn't find any footprints. Whatever that thing is, it doesn't let up to take a breath. As far as the sounds, it's mechanical, rhythmical. I can't even begin to describe it. It isn't like a mountain lion or a bear, and a bear can make some pretty weird noises. I heard no other reports of Bigfoot until 3 to 4 years ago. I was in Mountain Creek and heard this thing again. A district ranger once took sighting from a backpacker near Balula Lake. That would have been in the 70s, west of the south entrance. Apparently, the person watched one on the other side of a small lake for 10 minutes. The ranger felt the witness was very sane. The sighting was witnessed by my friend and myself, both geologists, while driving into Yellowstone from Cody for employment at the park for the summer. My friend was taking his turn at driving, and I was soaking up as much as I could see, as well as providing a running commentary to keep my friend alert during our very long drive. As we came around a curve in the road, our high beams illuminated a large, dark, shaggy figure coming up out of the ditch on the left-south side of the road, at a distance of roughly 200 to 250 feet. As we approached the figure at a speed of about 45 miles per hour, it looked first at the vehicle. We noticed the yellow reflection from its eyes that is seen in dogs' eyes when light catches it at night, then deliberately turned its head away from the lights. That motion was non-human or bear-like, in that the shoulders, chest, and head moved simultaneously as it caught sight of our vehicle, then turned its face away from the headlights. We slowed. Okay, we slammed on the brakes, stunned at what we were seeing, and tried to rationalize what we were looking at. A hominid creature, perhaps 7.5 feet in height. We have a 7-foot friend as a reference. Massing perhaps 600 to 800 pounds, without obvious signs of obesity. Standing completely and comfortably upright. Came up out of the ditch from the left side of the road, right at the edge of the metal barrier above the culvert. It took 3 extraordinarily long and fluid strides across the highway, which is measured at 22 feet, and another 3 to 4 shorter strides down the other side of the road, actually appearing to catch hold of the metal barrier with one long, fingered, hairy hand, and swinging down under the road into the box culvert or channel bottom, completely out of our line of sight. We stopped the vehicle within 25 feet of the culvert and watched as the final descent of the creature went off into the darkness of the channel. At this point, we sped on towards the east gate of Y&P, hoping to find a ranger to report the sighting to, perhaps to go back and take another look. There was no one at the gate, due to the late hour. We didn't see any lights on anywhere, so we continued on to our destination, went to bed, deciding not to contaminate each other's observations with discussions until morning time. In the morning, we both independently described graphically and in writing as much as what we could have seen 6 hours earlier. This is a synopsis of our findings. They were virtually identical, down to the movement of which leg moved first as the creature crossed the road. The head appeared to merge into the neck, and there was no snout or protrusion from the face as would be commonly seen in a bear. Trust me, I've seen hundreds, up close and in person. This was not some misidentity. The face was not clearly visible and was only glimpsed for a moment. We both got an impression of long hair covering some of it. The nostrils were large and open, but neither of us were able to describe mouth or teeth. The eyes weren't exceptional, just the reflection of gold, like a dog's. What each of us can still describe, with great clarity in the size, shape, and unique fluid movement of the creature. It was big, 7 to 7.5 feet tall, but not much bigger than that. It was heavy and powerful looking. In shape, it possessed a rather blocky, yet elongated head, slightly domed on top of the cranium, thick, short neck, broad shoulders, full chest. It was square and longer through the torso and hips than a human is. As it walked across the road in front of us, the buttocks was clearly seen as a muscular mass moving under heavy, shaggy hair. They obviously attached to a long, powerful, muscular thighs, longer in proportion to a human, big knees that functioned as a human knee, thick, muscular calves, and feet in proportion to the rest of its oversized body. The soles of the feet appeared to be hairless, or less hair covered in hair, and very dark in color. The arms hung from heavily muscled shoulders and were longer than a human, reaching to knee length and extending fully, almost a horizontal position to the front and rear of the body as it moved. The elbows were perhaps a little further down the arm than on a human, or the unusual length of the arm made it appear so. The hands were large and long-fingered. Neither of us could later describe the palms, nails, or other than the backs of the hands, which were covered in the same long, shaggy, dark brown hair as the rest of the creature. The creature made no sound nor gesture through the entire sighting. It appeared a little startled at our vehicle, appearing out of the night, but in no other way frightened or threatening. Startled the heck out of the two of us, though. I have never seen anything like it. This was also around 1:45 in the morning. Weather conditions were very clear, calm and cool. The night was very dark, with only starlight, and the headlights of our vehicle on high beam providing any light or illumination. I have no personal knowledge of other sightings of this nature in this particular area. This happened in Yellowstone Park, on the east entrance into the park, coming from Cody, Wyoming direction. At the base of the mountain, the road crews had huge gravel piles that they were using in building this new road. I was looking up the mountain to see if I could spot bighorn sheep, as we had seen grizzly, and many other of the Yellowstone animals while driving the loop of the park. I immediately noticed at one on the side of the mountain, nearest a top, large triangular patch of snow, and walking in strides, a tall and 8 to 9 foot hairy, upright, Bigfoot-like animal. It was so tall that you couldn't help but not see it. Then, it made 3 strides across this rocky terrain and stopped just above a green grassy-like area next to the snow. My son saw the same sight as I, because he was excited, saying that it looked and walked like Chewbacca, the Star Wars character. Even though it was so high above us, you could make out what it was. I'm only sorry that we couldn't stop and pull off, but the traffic was fast, and nowhere to pull off because of road crews. As we're driving out of the park, there was a lot of road construction involving the park roads. The work crews were all along the area in which I saw it high up, on the side of the mountain. There was a snow. I would like to know if there have been sightings of this thing in the area before. The flag girl on the roadside was not aware of any sightings, but I'm interested to find this out. Since my husband was driving, he was unable to see it, but my younger son saw the same sight as myself.